Kyle was scheduled to head out on an overseas business venture, representing a burgeoning shoe company that was making waves in the industry. He was slated to deliver a series of presentations that could determine the company's international market positioning for the next year. The night before his departure, as Kyle was meticulously going over his presentation notes, his phone buzzed to life. It was Janet.
"Hey, Kyle,"
she began hesitantly.
"I know this is really last minute and you have your trip tomorrow, but could we possibly squeeze in another driving session?"
Kyle sighed internally. He knew the importance of his upcoming journey, but he also remembered how terrified Janet was behind the wheel when they first started. Her progress was significant, but she still lacked the confidence to drive solo. It would have to be early in the morning. I mean really early, when the streets are almost empty. "Do you think you can manage that?" Kyle offered. Janet's voice perked up, a hint of hope seeping in.
"Oh, Kyle, I would really appreciate it. I promise to be on time. I won't keep you long. Just a quick session to boost my confidence."
As Kyle hung up, he adjusted his alarm to wake him up a little earlier. It would be a long day, but he found solace in the fact that he was making a difference in someone's life, even in the smallest of ways. At 65, Janet felt an unfamiliar flutter of excitement and apprehension in her chest. She had made up her mind. It was high time she learned to drive. Today marked her 7th driving lesson with Kyle. For nearly 45 years, Janet had been an unwavering fixture at the local dairy farm. The scent of fresh hay, the sound of mooing cows, and the rhythm of daily chores had become second nature to her. Every day she'd board the company bus, watching the pastures blend into the town and then her quaint home. It was at this very dairy farm that she had met John, her pillar of strength and love for all these years. John, with his broad shoulders and twinkling eyes, operated the forklift. When they had exchanged wedding vows, they owned just one rusty car, its paint chipping but engine roaring strong. To Janet, learning to drive then seemed like an unnecessary luxury. Besides, John always enjoyed being behind the wheel, ferrying them to picnics, family gatherings, or just spontaneous midnight drives. Their children came along, filling their lives with laughter, chaos, and a myriad of responsibilities. John seamlessly took on the role of the family chauffeur. The world seemed to come to a shattering halt for Janet when John suddenly succumbed to a stroke at the age of 70. For all the years they had been together, she had never needed to drive. Now, without him, the world felt expansive and daunting. Although her loving children offered assistance, Janet was keenly aware of their own busy lives and responsibilities. She felt it wasn't fair to constantly lean on them. It was during these moments of reflection that she made the resolve to conquer her apprehension and learn to drive. After several weeks of instruction, Janet had managed to pass all her exams, and the day she held her brand new driver's license in her hand was one filled with a mix of pride and trepidation. Among the various individuals Janet had approached to accompany her during her driving endeavors, Kyle stood out as the most compassionate and patient. Previous attempts with her children had left her frazzled and more anxious than she had started. "Mom, it's just the blinkers," her daughter had exclaimed in exasperation during one lesson, throwing her hands up. "How can you keep forgetting that?" "I'm trying, dear," Janet had replied, her voice trembling, fighting back tears of frustration. "It's not as easy for me as it is for you." And that's where Kyle made all the difference. With a calm demeanor and encouraging words, he turned every mistake into a teachable moment. "Oh, Janet," he'd laugh after one such blunder, his eyes twinkling with mirth. "That's the accelerator, not the brake. But don't worry, we all mix them up at first." She would respond with a sheepish grin, her anxiety melting away. "Oh dear, I guess I have a long way to go, don't I?" As their lessons progressed, the confines of the car transformed into a space where stories flowed freely. Kyle's genuine interest in her tales of a bygone era and his own anecdotes from a world she was only just beginning to understand bridged the generation gap effortlessly. Their driving sessions morphed into cherished moments, a blend of instruction and shared stories, connecting past and present. The bond between Janet and Kyle was palpable. She came to regard him with the same warmth and affection reserved for her son. Their relationship was not the one that could be boxed into conventional terms, especially considering their unique connection. Astoundingly, Kyle was Janet's former son-in-law. Janet often marveled at the turn of events. Life has a curious way of weaving stories, she would muse, recalling the time when Kyle was married to her daughter Sheila. Kyle and Sheila had woven a tapestry of memories over 4 years of marriage. However, like many stories, theirs was not without its twists and turns. In the initial days, like many budding relationships, everything seemed picture perfect. Sheila was a radiant young woman who turned heads wherever she went. Many were captivated by her charm, her beauty making her the envy of many and the desire of others. Yet, as time went on, it became evident that while Sheila was undeniably beautiful, she often lacked the foresight and wisdom that life's challenges demanded. Kyle, with his chiseled features, next to Sheila, they made a striking pair, often eliciting admiring glances from onlookers. After tying the knot, Kyle and Sheila settled into a cozy apartment of their own. But the bond between Kyle and Sheila's family, especially Janet, was profound. Despite having a new home to manage, Kyle never let the distance interfere with his relationship with his mother-in-law. At least once a week, he would make it a point to visit Janet's home. But these visits weren't mere formalities. With rolled-up sleeves and a ready smile, Kyle would dive into any task that needed doing. Whether it was fixing a leaky faucet, tending to the garden, or even helping with the grocery shopping, Kyle was always on hand, eager to lend his support. Janet was blessed with 2 children, Sheila and Gus. While Sheila had always been close to home, Gus had charted his own course, settling in a different state. The geographical distance, however, never distanced him from the family's bond. When it came time for Gus and his family to relocate to a new home, Kyle didn't think twice. Recognizing the enormity of the task ahead, he promptly took a few days off work to be of assistance. Kyle exuded a quiet, unassuming charm. In an age where pretense and facade were common, his genuineness was a refreshing change. He wasn't one for grand gestures or ostentatious displays. Instead, he valued authenticity and the beauty of simple, heartfelt interactions. By the close of their second year together, a shadow had begun to cast itself over Kyle and Sheila's once blissful union. To the outside world, they were the epitome of marital happiness, always arm in arm, sharing laughter, and seemingly in sync. But behind the closed doors of their home, a palpable tension was building. At the heart of their troubles was an unspoken longing, the desire to start a family. Sheila, in particular, found herself grappling with a profound internal conflict. With each passing day, she oscillated between the hope of cradling a child in her arms and the thought of ending the marriage that was, in her eyes, remaining unfulfilled. Initially, the couple had approached the subject of children with an easygoing optimism, but as months turned into years, without the pitter-patter of tiny feet, their initial carefreeness transformed into growing concern. The discovery that Kyle was sterile was a devastating revelation for the couple. The reality that there was no medical solution to their issue hit them hard, but the emotional impacts varied vastly between them. For Kyle, while the news was undoubtedly painful, he found a way to cope and continue to be his resilient self. One evening, sitting on their patio under the dim glow of the string lights, he murmured, "There are many ways to build a family, Sheila. We'll find ours." But for Sheila, the news was soul-crushing. The dream she had harbored of one day holding a baby, their baby, seemed to shatter. She often found herself lost in thought, envisioning the echoes of giggles and the joy of first steps that might never be. "I always imagined our child, Kyle," she confided one particularly hard night, her voice breaking. "I imagined them having your eyes, your smile, and now—" Kyle held her close, his own heart heavy with shared grief. "We'll find a way," he whispered, though the path forward was clouded with uncertainty. As the initial shock began to subside, Kyle, ever the problem solver, started exploring alternative paths to parenthood. He immersed himself in research, seeking out every possible avenue from adoption to surrogacy. Each time he stumbled upon a potential solution, his heart swelled with hope, eager to share it with Sheila. One evening, after hours of scouring articles and forums, Kyle approached Sheila with a folder brimming with information. "Sheila," he began tentatively, "I've been looking into adoption. There's so many children out there who need a loving home. Maybe we can be that home for one of them." Sheila, however, seemed distant, her gaze fixed on a point beyond Kyle. The idea of considering alternatives felt like a betrayal to the dream she had held onto for so long. Kyle, trying another approach, said, "Or we could think about surrogacy. It's a way we can still have a biological connection to our child." Sheila took a deep breath, her voice barely audible. I need time, Kyle. I need to come to terms with everything." Behind a facade of composure, Sheila harbored a deeply entrenched belief that remained known only to her. The idea of starting a family in a conventional manner, without the intervention of medical treatments or adoption, was paramount in her mind. To her, the path to motherhood was a sacred one, and she had always envisioned it unfolding in a particular way. Sheila was a perfectionist by nature, and this trait permeated every facet of her life, from the meticulous way she arranged their home to the precision with which she approached her work. She pursued an ideal, and in her ideal world, starting a family had a very specific script. The once minor disagreements that were quickly mended with a loving gesture or a simple conversation began to evolve into protracted silences and chilly exchanges. The warmth and laughter that once permeated their home seemed to dissipate, replaced by an ever-growing tension. The love was still there, but it was buried beneath layers of pain and misunderstanding. Recognizing the widening chasm between them, Kyle, in a bid to salvage their relationship, suggested therapy. He hoped that a neutral environment, guided by a professional, might help them navigate their complex emotions and pave the way for reconciliation. After several therapy sessions, where they both laid bare their deepest fears and desires, there came a day that would forever be etched in Kyle's memory. As they sat side by side on the therapist's plush couch, Sheila took a deep breath and whispered words that sent a shockwave through Kyle's being. "I want a divorce." Time seemed to stop. Kyle felt as though the ground beneath him had been ripped away, leaving him free-falling into an abyss of despair. Every plan, every shared dream, every whispered secret under the covers now felt like fragments of a mirage. The enormity of the pain was almost physical, a crushing weight on his chest. He looked into Sheila's eyes, searching for some sign that she didn't truly mean it, but all he saw was a profound sadness. "Is this truly what you want?" he managed to ask, his voice trembling. Sheila nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I think it's best for both of us, Kyle." In that moment, as the reality of their shattered future dawned on him, Kyle realized that sometimes, despite the deepest of loves, paths diverge and dreams evolve, but the heartbreak of that realization would stay with him for a long time. Following the painful dissolution of their marriage, Kyle found himself engulfed in a profound sense of solitude. The rooms of the house they once shared, filled with memories of their time together, seemed to echo with her laughter, intensifying his loneliness. The love he held for Sheila remained undiminished, even as he tried to cope with the jarring reality of their separation. Sheila, on the other hand, appeared to be taking a different approach. Whether it was an attempt to mask her pain or genuinely move forward, she embarked on a quest to leave their shared past behind. And when, just a scant 4 months after the ink had dried on their divorce papers, news reached Kyle that Sheila had begun seeing someone new, the weight of his heartbreak intensified. Kyle had woven himself so seamlessly into Sheila's family fabric that even after their split, he found solace in Janet's comforting presence. Janet's home had always been a sanctuary for him, a place where he felt loved and valued. So despite the changes in his personal life, he would frequently visit, pitching in with chores or simply sharing moments of warmth with Janet. Their bond transcended the complications that arose from his divorce. On a particularly memorable afternoon, as they sat in the cozy kitchen nook enjoying a homemade lunch, a sudden, alarming incident underscored the depth of their connection. Mid-sentence, Janet's face turned a worrying shade of red as she began to cough violently. Within seconds, it became apparent that she was choking. Kyle's instincts and prior first aid training kicked into high gear. Pushing back his chair with urgency, he swiftly moved behind Janet. Wrapping his arms around her waist, he made a fist just above her navel and executed a series of forceful upward thrusts. The Heimlich maneuver. After a tense moment that felt like an eternity, a piece of food dislodged from Janet's throat, and she gasped for air, her face regaining its natural color. As Janet steadied her breathing, Kyle's anxious eyes met hers. "Are you okay, Janet?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Janet, still recovering from the shock, nodded.
"Thanks to you, dear. I can't believe what just happened."
Wrapping a comforting arm around her, Kyle replied,
"I'm just glad I was here and knew what to do. Please be careful."
The near tragedy further cemented their bond, illustrating that even amidst the complexities of family dynamics and personal relationships, genuine care and love persist. The life-altering event at Janet's kitchen had deeply moved her, and she felt it was crucial for Sheila to know of Kyle's heroics. But when Janet recounted the harrowing experience to Sheila, expecting her to be relieved and grateful, the reaction was entirely different. Sheila's face hardened as she listened, skepticism evident in her eyes. "Mom, it sounds like another of Kyle's stunts," she said dismissively. "Probably just another way he's trying to worm his way back into our lives and play the hero." Janet, taken aback by her daughter's criticism, replied with a firmness in her voice.
"Sheila, I was there. It wasn't an act. He saved my life. Why can't you see that he genuinely cares about our family?"
Sheila sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "You know, he has a way of making everything about him. I just don't buy this story." Janet's heart ached at her daughter's stubbornness and unwillingness to accept the truth. "It saddens me that you can't see past your own prejudices," she said softly.
"Kyle has always been there for us, even when he didn't have to be. The least you can do is acknowledge that."
Their conversation ended on a somber note. Sheila's refusal to believe her mother created a rift between them, one that Janet had never anticipated. She began to distance herself from her daughter, pained by her inability to recognize genuine acts of kindness and persistent cloud of skepticism she cast over Kyle's intentions. Life's tide ebbs and flows, moving forward regardless of the heartaches and joys we encounter. Sheila, having found a new chapter in her life, was basking in the glow of an upcoming wedding. In stark contrast, Kyle's world was still enveloped in a blanket of solitude. But as fate would have it, a serendipitous encounter awaited him. One evening, Kyle was trudging back home from work, lost in thought. The faint, pitiful mews of a small creature broke his reverie. Glancing down, he spotted a frail kitten, its fur matted and eyes wide, scavenging for scraps in a discarded paper bag. The vulnerability mirrored in the kitten's eyes resonated with the loneliness Kyle felt, creating an instant bond. Without a second thought, he scooped up the tiny kitten and headed home. He christened his new furry friend Leo. From that day, a spark of joy returned to Kyle's life. Leo's playful antics, from chasing after balls of yarn to leaping into Kyle's lap unexpectedly, became the highlight of his evenings. The small apartment that once echoed with silence was now filled with the merry sounds of Leo's purrs and playful meows. And as destiny would have it, Leo was not only destined to change Kyle's life, but would soon play an instrumental role in another's life, weaving together threads of fate in a tapestry yet to be revealed. 10 months. That's how long it had been since the divorce, but for Kyle, the weight of each day without Sheila felt like an eternity. The morning sun was just beginning its descent, casting a warm golden hue upon the city. With purpose, Kyle zipped up his suitcase and took one last glance around his apartment before heading out. Pulling into Janet's driveway, the comforting aroma of breakfast wafted through the air. Janet, with her signature warm hospitality, had laid out a spread of buttered toast, scrambled eggs, and freshly brewed coffee. Over breakfast, they chatted, reminiscing about old times and chuckling over shared memories. Janet's heart went out to Kyle. Despite being her daughter's ex-husband, she felt closer to him than she did to Sheila at times. Janet had often tried to understand Sheila's reasons, but their conversations about it would usually end in heated debates, with Sheila exclaiming, "Mom, it's my life." As the morning progressed, Kyle excused himself to use the bathroom. To his surprise, the doorknob resisted his attempt to turn it. Frowning, he tried again, applying more force. Janet's voice called out, "Oh, you have to pull it towards you and then push down." "Never mind," he said with a chuckle, heading straight for the shed. The familiar layout of Janet's home was embedded in his memory, a testament to the many hours he'd spent helping out, divorce notwithstanding. From her vantage point in the kitchen, Janet watched Kyle work, a fond smile gracing her features. He was effortlessly efficient, fixing the stubborn knob in no time. She admired his dedication and resilience, silently hoping that life would eventually shower him with the happiness he deserved. She held a quiet wish in her heart that someday the universe would conspire in his favor, introducing him to someone who would cherish him as much as she did. Janet and Kyle concluded their driving lesson. The streets, bathed in a gentle orange glow, seemed to reflect Janet's own emotions, a mix of warmth and a touch of sadness. Pulling into the driveway, Janet took a deep breath and turned to Kyle. "You know, if you ever decide to move abroad for good, I'll truly miss you." Her voice wavered slightly, revealing the depth of her sentiment. "To be honest, the thought of not seeing you for the next 2 weeks already feels like a small eternity." Kyle looked over, touched by her genuine concern. For a moment, words eluded him. All he could do was lean over and envelope her in a comforting embrace. "Thank you," he murmured, "for being like a second mother to me." Their hug lingered, a silent testament to the bond they shared. Reluctantly pulling away, Kyle started his car and began the journey to the airport. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the road lulled him into a pensive state. It was only when a small meow sounded from his phone's ringtone, a reminder of Leo, that he was jolted back to reality. "Leo!" he exclaimed. In the midst of all the preparations and goodbyes, he had completely forgotten about his kitten. Checking the time, Kyle realized he had a buffer before his flight. But who could he entrust with Leo's care? His options were limited, but one stood out: Janet. As Kyle stood outside Janet's door, a knot of concern formed in his stomach. Multiple calls had gone unanswered, and her silence was uncharacteristic. He glanced down at the restless kitten in his arms, meowing softly for attention. Taking a deep breath, Kyle decided to leave Leo in Janet's house, hoping she'd return soon. Unlocking the door with the spare key Janet had given him, Kyle placed Leo on the plush living room rug, along with some food, water, and his litter box. As he was about to leave, he scribbled a hasty note and left it on the kitchen counter. The words, "I hope Leo will keep you company until I come back," seemed too simple to convey his genuine concern. Crouching down to Leo's level, Kyle looked into the kitten's curious eyes. "You keep an eye on the house for me, alright, big guy?" He ruffled the kitten's fur, trying to mask the worry that was slowly gnawing at him. With a final glance around the silent house, he left, gently closing the door behind him. After wrapping up his business trip, Kyle was more than ready to get home. The past few days had been a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and negotiations. Although the trip had been a huge success and his company had secured several new contracts, he was exhausted. His desire to return home was further delayed when he found out his flight was postponed due to a severe storm. With 6 hours to kill, Kyle settled on one of the benches in the departure lounge. Soon after, a woman and her young son took the seats next to him. The little boy, with his tousled hair and restless energy, began to kick the side of his mother's suitcase. It wasn't long before he started clamoring for another ride atop the luggage. Glancing over, Kyle gave them a warm smile, his eyes crinkling at the edges. Sensing an opportunity to ease the mother's burden, he offered, "Hey, champ, how about trying a spin on my suitcase?" The boy's eyes lit up in excitement. "Really?" "Sure. We might as well make the most of our delay," Kyle chuckled, giving a knowing look to the boy's wary mother. The trio made their way around the terminal, with the little boy, who introduced himself as Noah, perched atop Kyle's suitcase. Throughout their impromptu adventure, Noah bombarded Kyle with questions, ranging from the mundane to the genuinely intriguing. "Why are the lights so bright? Do planes always fly, even when it's raining?" Kyle answered each with enthusiasm and patience, leading Noah to ask, "Are you a teacher or something?" "Just a curious person like you," Kyle replied with a chuckle. As they wheeled past the toy store, Noah hopped off the suitcase and pressed his nose against the window, staring longingly at a Superman action figure. Unlike most children, he didn't throw a tantrum or demand a toy. He just looked, admiration evident in his eyes. Seeing this, Noah's mother approached with a hint of apprehension. "Remember what we talked about, Noah? We can't buy it today." Kyle, sensing an opportunity to bring a bit of joy to the little boy's day, gave a silent, questioning look to the mother. She hesitated, then nodded ever so slightly. Purchasing the action figure, Kyle handed it to Noah. "Every adventurer needs a sidekick," he said with a wink. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Noah's mother whispered, "You really didn't have to. Thank you." Kyle just smiled, thinking how a simple act of kindness could make long delays at an airport bearable. While the hours dragged on, Kyle learned more about the captivating woman sitting beside him. Natalie, with her soft hazel eyes and resilient spirit, was a single mother doing her best to provide for her son. As they chatted, Kyle noticed a subtle shadow that crossed her face when she spoke about her past. As Noah played energetically, imagining the airport benches as alien spacecrafts, Natalie delved deeper into her story. "He misses his dad," she shared, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a year and a half, but it feels like just yesterday." Pausing, she continued, "His father was a helicopter pilot, passionate about his work. He always said the sky was where he truly felt alive. A year and a half ago, he was test flying a new model. Something went wrong and he didn't make it back." Watching Noah, who was now getting tired from their intergalactic battle, Kyle felt a pang in his heart. After a few more minutes of playing, the little boy nibbled on a sandwich Natalie had packed and soon dozed off, his head resting against Kyle's knee. The side was tender and heartbreaking. "I'm so sorry," Kyle said, placing a comforting hand on Natalie's arm. "Life can be so unpredictable." Unfortunately, fate had other plans, as they were booked on different flights. However, before parting, Kyle scribbled down his contact information. "If you and Noah ever find yourself in my town, please don't hesitate to visit. It would be lovely to see you both again." Natalie smiled, grateful for the unexpected friendship that had blossomed in a dreary airport. "Thank you, Kyle." When Kyle returned home from his business trip, he was eager to visit Janet. He had picked up special gifts for her from his travels, and he was excited to share them. Pulling into her driveway, however, a sense of unease settled over him. Workers bustled around, removing charred furniture from the house, though the exterior of the house seemed unscathed. Panic welled up inside him. Rushing forward, he approached the worker. "What happened here?" he demanded, his voice laced with worry. "Kitchen fire," the worker replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm not sure about the details. We were just called in to repair the damage." Kyle's heart raced. "Do you know if everyone's okay? Where's Janet?" The worker shrugged. "Sorry, mate. We just fixed things. Haven't seen the owners." Spotting Janet's neighbor mowing his lawn, Kyle approached him with hurried steps. "Tom, is Janet okay? What happened?" Tom, pausing his mowing, wiped his brow and looked at Kyle with a mixture of relief and surprise. "Oh, Kyle, you're back. Janet's fine. There was a kitchen fire a few days ago, but she wasn't hurt. Just scared the life out of her, I reckon." Kyle's shoulders slumped in relief. "Thank God. Did she mention how it started?" Tom shook his head. "Didn't go into details. But you know the funniest thing? A few days after the fire, she pulled into the driveway, driving better than I've ever seen her drive. Guess the driving lessons you gave her did some magic." Kyle chuckled weakly, still recovering from his initial panic. "Yeah, maybe. Thanks, Tom. I'll try to reach her." Tom gave Kyle a reassuring pat on the back. "She's a tough one, that Janet. Always has been." Nodding, Kyle headed back to his car, determined to get in touch with Janet and ensure she was truly all right. Several days after the incident, Kyle's phone buzzed with a call from Janet. He picked up immediately, relieved to hear her familiar voice on the other end. "Kyle, dear, I'm so sorry for not reaching out sooner. My phone was caught in that kitchen blaze," Janet explained, her voice sounding a touch warier than usual. "I'm just glad you're okay," Kyle replied, his voice heavy with concern. "I'm staying with Sheila for the time being," she continued. "You know, her boyfriend's apartment? They're going away for the weekend, but you could drop by if you'd like." The thought of visiting the place where his ex-wife lived stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Kyle. The memories, the love that once was, the pain of the breakup, all came flooding back. But he had to see Janet, ensure she was truly all right, especially after the ordeal. "Of course, Janet. I'll come by." Pulling up to Sheila's apartment complex, Kyle took a deep breath to steady himself. When the entrance door swung open, he saw Janet, a broad smile on her face, holding Leo on her lap. The sight was a balm to his anxieties. "Leo!" Kyle exclaimed, laughing. "I completely forgot about the little guy. I'm so sorry." Janet chuckled. "It's been quite the comfort. It's kept me company, the cheeky thing." Kyle reached out to pet the kitten, feeling its purrs vibrating under his touch. "I guess we both found solace in this little fella." Janet nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Come in, dear. Let's catch up." Janet's fingers gently ruffled the fur on Leo's head. The way she held the kitten, it was evident that a bond had formed between them. She looked up at Kyle, her eyes holding a mixture of gratitude and tears, and took a step closer, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. He could feel the dampness of her tears seeping through his shirt. Pulling away slightly, Janet wiped the tears from her cheeks and managed a weak smile. "You probably think I've gone a bit daft, getting emotional over a cat," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "But Leo, he saved me." She took a deep breath, her fingers idly stroking the kitten, and began to recount the harrowing night. "I had taken a nap," she explained, "and I woke up with Leo on top of me, nudging me, meowing loudly. At first, I thought he was just being playful or perhaps hungry, but then I smelled the smoke. When I got to the kitchen, flames had taken hold of the curtains and were quickly spreading. It was Leo's persistent nudges that woke me." She looked directly into Kyle's eyes, a deep sense of gratitude reflecting in her own. "If it hadn't been for Leo, I might not have woken up in time. And it was you, Kyle, who brought him into my life. I can't help but think there's a bigger reason for all of this, like some unseen force guiding events." Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. The realization that he had indirectly played such a pivotal role in saving Janet's life was overwhelming. "Janet," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm just grateful you're safe. It's almost like Leo was sent to us as a guardian angel." Janet nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes. "He's more than just a pet to me now. He's family. And so are you, Kyle." Janet's eyebrows furrowed in thought as Kyle began to detail his trip, but when he mentioned Natalie and Noah, a keen observant would notice a slight change in her demeanor. She leaned in a little closer, her interest visibly piqued. Janet tilted her head, analyzing Kyle's expressions. "You have that look in your eyes, Kyle. The same one you used to have when you talked about Sheila in the early days." Kyle sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not like that, Janet. It was just a brief encounter. But there's something about them, especially after hearing their story. It resonates with me." Janet's gaze softened, and she nodded, placing a comforting hand on Kyle's arm. "Life has a way of introducing us to the people we need at the most unexpected times. Maybe there is a reason you met them." When Kyle mentioned the helicopter crash, Janet's eyes widened in recognition. "I remember hearing about that accident on the news. It was so tragic." As the days turned into weeks, the rhythm of life persisted for everyone. Leo had now comfortably settled into his new life with Janet. As Kyle's birthday drew closer, Janet had been busy planning a special celebration to lift his spirits. She warmly invited him over to her house, promising a homemade cake and a delightful dinner. For Kyle, birthdays had lost their charm, and he treated it like any other day, but he agreed to spend the day with Janet, appreciating her effort to make it special. Upon his arrival at Janet's driveway, Kyle's eyes immediately caught sight of two unfamiliar cars parked there. A pang of anxiety hit him as his mind raced to the possibility of Sheila being present. She had made her boundaries clear, asking Kyle to respect her space and avoid contact. He noticed that the license plates were from out of state, which slightly eased his concern, but curiosity got the better of him. He decided to put his worries aside and walk towards the house, ready to uncover the mystery of the unexpected guests. As Kyle stepped through the doorway, enveloped by darkness, he felt a sense of anticipation in the air. Without warning, a burst of confetti erupted around him, and the room was suddenly bathed in warm, welcoming light. Before him stood Gus, his boisterous laughter filling the space, clad in an extravagant costume along with his entire lively family. But amidst the jubilant chaos, he noticed two familiar faces, Natalie and Noah, modestly clapping and wearing heartfelt smiles. Surprise etched on his face, Kyle was momentarily stunned before being engulfed in a sea of hugs, kisses, and congratulatory cheers. As he looked around, absorbing the joyous atmosphere, his gaze locked with Natalie's, and in that instant, his heart fluttered, skipping a beat. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, happiness welled up inside him, pure and unadulterated. Scooping up Noah with ease, Kyle hoisted him onto his shoulders, and they began to dance and sway to the rhythm of the laughter and chatter around them. It was a moment of uninhibited joy, a celebration of life and connections, old and new. Janet, always the observant one, had noticed the light that danced in Kyle's eyes when he spoke of his chance encounter with Natalie and Noah. From the way he described their interaction, she sensed the connection that went beyond the fleeting nature of a random airport meeting. Sensing that this might be the spark that could bring genuine happiness back into Kyle's life, she decided to take action. A couple of weeks and several online searches later, Janet finally found a lead. She discovered Natalie's social media profile. Taking a deep breath, she sent Natalie a friend request along with a message explaining who she was and the profound impact their meeting had on Kyle. To Janet's relief, Natalie responded quickly, and they soon began chatting. They shared stories, laughter, and spoke of the deep bond Natalie and Noah had formed with Kyle during that short meeting. As Janet learned more about Natalie's past, she felt even more certain that these two souls were meant to cross paths. Recognizing the potential for something beautiful to blossom, Janet hatched a plan. "Would you and Noah be interested in attending a little gathering?" she had asked Natalie. "It's Kyle's birthday, and I think he'd be over the moon to see you both." Surrounded by friends, old and new, and with the presence of Natalie and Noah, Kyle felt a profound sense of belonging and happiness. The evening was a vibrant tapestry of laughter, stories, and newfound connections, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Kyle's life. Ever since that surprise birthday party, he'd grown closer to Natalie and Noah, and they had seamlessly become an integral part of his life. The mutual respect and love they shared was evident, and as the days turned to weeks and weeks into months, their bond only deepened. Their relationship was built on a foundation of understanding, trust, and unwavering commitment to one another. Natalie, with her compassionate heart and nurturing spirit, often spoke of her dream to extend her family. After one evening, under a blanket of stars, she timidly suggested the idea of adoption to Kyle. While it was a big step, Kyle recognized the depth of love Natalie could offer. Having seen her dedication to Noah, he too felt the pull of paternal love and the yearning to provide a loving home to another child. After an emotionally charged journey filled with anticipation, paperwork, and countless interviews, they welcomed little Sophia into their home. Her tiny hands, infectious giggle, and inquisitive eyes brought new joy and purpose into their lives. Janet's role in the family dynamic was indispensable. Having been there through the ups and downs, her bond with Kyle's family was unbreakable. Whether it was Sunday dinners, play dates, or even occasional babysitting stints, she was a constant presence, offering wisdom, comfort, and love. One sunny day at the park, as Kyle pushed Sophia on the swings and watched Noah and Natalie engaged in a playful tug-of-war, he spotted a familiar face. Sheila, looking slightly older and wearing the weight of the years on her face, was there with her two children. Their paths hadn't crossed in so long, and the emotional distance between them was palpable. Their eyes met, a silent conversation passing between them. The fleeting glance carried the weight of past memories, regrets, and what-ifs. But in Kyle's eyes, there was also understanding and forgiveness. His gentle smile, free of any bitterness, conveyed a simple message. The past was behind them, and it was okay to move forward. Sheila, seemingly taken aback by the genuineness of his smile, offered the hesitant one in return. It was a moment of closure, an unspoken acknowledgement that while their paths had diverged, they both had found their way.